Well, the organization, a huge pillar of what we do is fight to defend public access. And corner crossing, in our opinion, is a public land right? Anybody within the organization, I would tell you, myself included, are rabid property rights advocates, both public and private. Corner crossing is an issue that we view as an impediment to public property rights, right? To be able to step from one corner of public to another corner without touching private land, physically touching the private land, and blocking that access is an impediment to public property rights. I don't know the acreage in Wyoming. Montana, I think there's estimated 1.5 to 2 million acres of landlocked land. Given the way that our state has changed over the last 4 years, the amount of pressure we see from people who want to get out and enjoy what Montana has to offer, opening up that land, defending those rights to access our public land via corner would help lower the pressures on all the other acres that we like to recreate on, right? So there's a huge benefit to it that way. Reality is that every one of those acres that's landlocked is owned by the public. We should have the right to access those pieces of property one way or the other. And accessing at the corners is a fantastic way to do it because you're not infringing on private property rights when you do that.
What did some of the past corner crossing disputes look like, and why does it feel like it's all coming to fruition right now?
Well, I mean, in Montana, there's been a handful of corner crossing issues. A lot of them you probably don't hear about, just given that the county attorneys, it's their discretion whether they want to prosecute a corner crossing case, and so they never make it into the news. There was one recently, I'd say in the last 12 months, Montana v. Sangre. A gentleman was caught. He was filmed corner crossing, and when it came down to it, the Office of the Attorney General decided not to prosecute. I can't tell you why they decided not to prosecute, but it's suspect, given such a clear-cut case of the gentleman crossing corners. The only thing that we can assume is that there is not law that makes it illegal in Montana.
That's kind of one of my next questions. When the FWP states corner crossing remains unlawful in Montana, what does that mean to you?
Well, we called them out for being wrong, and what I can tell you is my response is that there is no law that stops you from corner crossing in Montana. So the citizens need to stand up and defend their rights to cross at corners too. Is that the department was wrong, this administration is wrong about corner crossing. It is not illegal in Montana. And I would encourage everyone who is a public land advocate, whether they're members of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers or a working resident Montana hunter, that it is up to you to defend your access to public lands. Get active in the legislature. We're likely to see threats to the things that we enjoy right now. We might see bills that make corner crossing illegal, and we're going to lose even more access. So stand up, defend your right to access your public lands. There's a lot of chatter about corner crossing right now. Part of conservation in Montana, a large part of conservation in Montana is being involved in the legislature. The way that we vote and the things that we do and the people we send to represent us in Helena is one of the largest single things you can do for conservation in the state. Because of that, we're actively involved in the legislature. We spend a lot of time in Helena. We hear a lot of scuttlebutt about what's going on, what to expect, what we might see. There's talk about corner crossing, and they could make an attempt to outright make it illegal. And Montanans, the working residents of the state, the working hunters, the folks who moved here to recreate just to enjoy their public lands are going to lose because of that. And so you got to get active.
What areas have the most of this locked up public land in Montana?
Oh, I'm most certainly it's got to be eastern part of the state. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of checkerboard stuff that happened over there with the railroad, and the western state has larger expanses of Forest Service land, wilderness areas, stuff like that. So yeah, I would. My educated guess is that the eastern part of the state's got a lot more checkerboard. Yeah. It's interesting in that checkerboard too, right? We talk about the Wyoming case. The argument is that the checkerboard was created so that the public could access the land at the corners. And here we have, again, we're talking about defending our rights to access public lands. We look at checkerboard as a problem, and it can be, but if you look at checkerboard as a way to actually increase your access at corners, it could be a really good thing, right? You're never gonna consolidate all checkerboard, right? And so if you're taking that argument from the Wyoming case and applying it to Montana, how many million? What do we say? 1.5, 2 million acres of landlocked public land. What a huge benefit that would be if we didn't have folks blocking our legal public access. Yeah, no, it's a great point. And in that case, we supported the additional fines to trespassing for hunting as a way to police our own. And kind of how I first started out, all of us are rabid property rights advocates. Like, we want to defend the rights of our ownership the same way we want to defend the rights of our ability to access our public lands. And so we actually, put our money where our mouth is. We talked about that a little bit before you came in, just the number of corner crossing cases.
Yeah, pretty small.
Pretty small. The ones you hear about are, a little bit, oftentimes they're related to someone who's very wealthy. They got a name that you got to know. Or in the Sangre case, that gentleman was kind of a very loud public, he wanted people to know that he was doing this or going through this, and he kind of reached out to the community of hunters and anglers and conservation orgs to ask for help, right? So he was broadcasting that message. We would have never known about it before. If it had just gone through the system and the AG's office declined to prosecute, there's no way we're not tracking everything like that. So again, it goes back to like how many phone calls are they getting and how many county attorneys are just declining to prosecute. No idea. Well, Montana stream access law follows a very similar path to the way we view corner crossing right now. Up until the early 70s, mid 70s, stream access wasn't legal. It wasn't illegal. It wasn't resolved in the courts. It took some action in the courtrooms to essentially make it legal, and then into the 80s, it was codified in law that, as we know, Montana's stream access law now. There's been additional court cases that have kind of expanded actually the access to streams since then based on those original laws. Corner crossings kind of falls in the same category where it is an unresolved issue. There isn't a law that makes it illegal. There isn't a law that specifically makes it legal. It's likely going to end up in a courtroom, whether there's a law that makes it legal or illegal in the legislature. It's probably going to wind up in the Montana Supreme Court. All that being said, it is our view that blocking access at a corner is still a takings of public property. The citizens of Montana and the people who come here to visit and recreate should be allowed to step from corner to corner legally and recreate on the public land that the public owns. It's such an easy issue to resolve. If people are worried about their fencing to keep their cows in, I understand that 100%. Montana's an agricultural economy, and those folks need to be able to protect those barriers. It's very easy for us to build a turnstile or a ladder over the top so that there is no damage to public property and that their fencing still remains untouched and undamaged. Absolutely. Yeah, it's not difficult to resolve. Like, the physical act of it's easy. It's how the law is written and the way it's interpreted. If you view public property the way that we do, and the way that the law does, that all citizens own public property, all Americans own the public land in America, we should all have the right to access that property. We shouldn't be limited to access the property we own. The way I think about this and the way I like to tell the story is the idea of the public owning wild game is one of the most American values we could possibly have. It is one of the reasons that we decided to declare our independence from the King of England, because that was our game. We are Americans, it is ours, we own it equally, we all have access to it. And so carrying that tradition forward, 250 something years, hope I did my math right, carrying that tradition forward, we have preserved that in a lot of places. And most in the West, it's a little easier where you have big expanses of public property and game kind of goes all over it. But across America, wildlife are owned by the citizens of those states. They're not owned by the private landowner where the wildlife resides. And to me, it's a uniquely American value. It is very easy for a landowner to just put up a gate on a road, or maybe even a gate on an easement on a shoulder over a bridge, just to try to intimidate people, to tell them that they can't go here. And then it's up to the citizens to say, wait, hey, hold on a minute, that's a public thing that we own. Then we have to call our county attorneys and our county commissioners and tell them to do, and ask them to do something to defend our rights. And then it's up to them to take action on behalf of the citizens. They used to hate elk, right? Because elk were eating their feed for cows. And there was a time, I remember in my youth, where it was a lot easier to get access to places like that were running cattle that had elk, and they wanted them gone. They wanted people to come shoot them. That still exists in Montana too, by the way. That's not like, it's not gone. You just don't hear about them as much anymore, right?
Further away from town.
It's further away from town. Like, yeah, that's a great way to say it. There's still a lot of great landowners in Montana. They participate in the block management programs. They do all kinds of stuff to participate in elk management. And they're great neighbors, and they should be celebrated for that. But the dynamic of the land ownership in Montana has changed, where you used to see real estate listings about how many pairs it could hold. Now it's like how many elk live on it, right? And so the elk and the wildlife has been monetized to a point here that has driven the resident hunter to a point where like we feel like we're losing a lot of the opportunity that we used to have, and that's just one of the pillars that's changed. We're in a nervous spot right now about corner crossing. We like watching what's happening in Wyoming. We have high hopes. We think that they've made some fantastic arguments, and the judges' ruling to date have been great for the public landowners. Again, we're aware that the current administration's only comment on corner crossing is that it's illegal, and that's different than what the current law says, and that's different than what previous administrations have said. And so we can only take that one little tidbit without any more information coming from this administration. There's no way for us to know. I mean, that's the best way we can inform ourselves. Given that, like, it would not surprise us one bit if there were law introduced this upcoming legislative session attempting to make corner crossing illegal, essentially taking that right away from the public to access their land at corners. Yeah, man, there's a lot of great organizations in Montana that defend public access, and whether it's public access or conservation, habitat, all those things. I can't tell you one that I don't work with that doesn't do a good job. They all kind of have different roles. BHA's role really is in that mission of keep public lands public hands. Then you have orgs like the PLWA, Public Land and Water Access Association. They're really fighting this thing out in the courtroom. Like, they do the dirty work and win a lot of court cases for the public on behalf of the public to preserve our access rights, right? You have the Montana Bowhunters Association that does some conservation work. They show up in Helena to defend resident hunters' opportunities, right? You have the Montana Wildlife Federation that does a lot of great stuff for wildlife and habitat. So every one of these orgs kind of has their own little space and niche, but we all find ourselves working together. There's a ton of overlap in what we do. I would like to think that if there was a corner crossing bill making it legal, that they would all show up to the plate and bat and try to get their membership out to know what's going on and show up in Helena to fight for their rights. In the same way that I believe that those same orgs would show up and try to stop a bill making it illegal.